Every democratic school is different because the students are all unique. Because of this type of education isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. Each school is allowed to express itself in its own creative way and to learn from other democratic schools. Because the organization isn't enclosed, education becomes highly fluid and dynamic. There is a self-perfecting mechanism built into the system itself.
I don't think the actual act of teaching is what's poison. I think the act of forcing it upon someone. Like, I think if you actually go to the person and want them to teach you, like in my coding class right now, Michelle, the person who's teaching me, doesn't really even know. I actually think I know more than she does at this moment. If we could all just brainstorm with each other, and if we wouldn't have the creativity beaten out of us at an early age, you know.
Either they'll default to the directory you're in.
I am a fan of algebra. It's fun. It's just really cool figuring out how you can make an equation this long turn into something this big and have an answer. It's, you know, it's enthralling. If your heart isn't in what you do, you'll never learn it. You just won't. You can try over and over and over again, but don't forget it. It just kind of like cramming for a test. You remember everything for the test, but after that, you're done.
I mean, I've grown up having friends that have been so much older than me, and I've learned so much from them, and they've been like older siblings to me. But then I've had the younger ones to be like that to them.
Being a child shouldn't be about waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning to sit in sterile classes for 6 hours a day, and then when they go home they're so tired that the only thing they want to do is watch TV and play video games. In many ways, they are basically going to work. In democratic schools, children learn because they want to learn. They are curious about the world and are driven internally to understand how things work. Public schools, on the other hand, kill creativity. The core philosophy behind education today assumes children can only learn when they are forced by punishment. This isn't to say there are no penalties in democratic schools. Here is an example of students themselves running their own judicial system. After 2 students got into a fight, they had to go to a judicial committee. Here's how the students explain the process.
Well, I say it's sort of like a court. How do I describe it? I basically just say that if you do something wrong, you get written up, and that gets taken to JC, which is a panel made up of people who are students and staff, you know, Fairhaven School meeting members. Then decide your fate by democratic action. A few people have asked me if it just descends into chaos, which, you know, it doesn't. I mean, it's still pretty well ordered. I mean, it's a little more amorphous than your average school, but I like that. Things don't really get that cold and calculating here at Fairhaven. Your friends, or at least acquaintances that you're trying, you know, but you obviously don't let that get in the way of your decisions. But it still keeps you from just turning it into some kind of bureaucratic machine.
Is there any further discussion on charging grant with dangerous activity? All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? That does not pass. Matt, you are charged with dangerous activity and harassment. How do you plead?
Guilty.
And how do you plead to harassment? Okay.
Guilty.
Thank you, Grant. Any sentence ideas from either? Matt, I recall you had one.
I was thinking maybe if you would agree to mediation.
I was actually considering Matt, how do you feel about mediation?
What the heck is that?
Mediation is where you sit down in a room with the person you've been having trouble with and like another person or two that are trained as mediators. You sit down and talk and try to come to a decision that will be best for everyone and leave you guys getting along.
Any more discussion on both of them being referred to school meeting and suggested mediation by that school meeting?
Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? Abstaining? You guys are referred to school meeting, and it's recommended that you get mediation before that. So you guys can come sign and
I was
not on JC, simply sitting and observing. And I saw that he was getting upset, and I was sort of torn. Half of me was saying, oh, I wish he wouldn't be upset. The other half of me was saying, well, he did deserve it. He did nasty things, and now he's getting in trouble. And then he started crying, and although I still felt that he was probably deserving the punishment he got, I had a huge amount of sympathy for him. I definitely feel a lot of compassion for both sides, really. You know, one of them, I'm sorry this thing happened to you, which the other person was at fault for, and then again for the defendant, where even though you did something that wasn't good and was against the rules, I'm still sorry that you're going to get in trouble for it. That doesn't outweigh the fact that you are going to get in trouble for it, and I think you probably deserved it. But you can still feel compassion without necessarily feeling the urge to immediately act upon it.
The real tragedy in public schools today is that children aren't being educated. They're being made into robots. When every child studies the same books and learns the same math and reads the same history, education not only becomes dull, it becomes anti-human. Students today are not learning because they can't retain the information after they take their standardized tests. They have no time to internalize information they've learned and how that knowledge applies to them and their life because they are moving endlessly from one class to another. Our education system has become faith-based. Students are told how the world works dogmatically. They are told history, but they never discover it for themselves. It is no wonder then that the more educated a person is, the more likely they will join a cult. The highly educated have been trained to believe anything they perceive as coming from an authoritative figure. Next to the right of life itself, the most fundamental of all human rights is the right to control our own minds and thoughts. That means the right to decide for ourselves how we will explore the world around us, how we think about our own and other persons' experiences, and find and make the meaning in our own lives. Whoever takes that right away from us, as the educators do, attacks the very center of our being and does us the most profound and lasting injury. They tell us in effect that we cannot be trusted even to think, that for all of our lives we must depend on others to tell us the meaning of our world and our lives, and that any meaning that we make for ourselves out of our own experiences has no value. There is an alternative. Democracy can prevail in the classroom.
If anyone asked me where I go to school, I have like this sort of standard response. Well, I go to a school called Fairhaven. It's democratically run. For example, you get to elect whether or not the staff gets to stay.
This school meeting today is they're trying to pass a rule that you have to get a parent approval on a sheet that says I am allowing my kid to go down to the stream, which I'm totally all for.
None of these kids were told what to do. Instead, the system works organically, unlike state-run schools which have to be imposed from the top down. Democratic schools, in many ways, represent left libertarianism. Without hierarchy, even small children don't descend into chaos. Because there are no restraints, the child is allowed to grow unhindered into their natural state of being, expressing the nuances of their surroundings and their own internal states. There is something insanely wrong with our public educational system. We as adults are robbing our children of their innocence, putting them in antiseptic boxes, crushing their creativity, treating them as soldiers for the private sector. Children today are nothing more than commodities to be used, sold, packaged, indexed, examined, and judged. The public schooling system is nothing more than an anti-life institution. We ask, what happened to our children? Why are they so decadent? Why do they do nothing more than watch TV and play video games? But how can we blame the young when they see our lives, when they see mom and dad going to their job for 8 hours a day, when people look more like zombies than substantive beings, when every day is routine, when people are too tired to spend time with their own families? It's not just the public educational system that's screwed up. It's us, the public. We have no choices in life, no say over our own being. We are crushed by a system that cares nothing for us. Public schools should not be assembly lines pushing out cookie-cutter people who go on to live in cookie-cutter homes, who think in cookie-cutter ways. When we inherited a system of education based on hierarchy, we built our society based on that model. We need to create a new democratic education so future generations are able to live in a society that cares for them, one based on our democratic ideals.